I need to get this out because it does not make sense to me, and I know the internet will have opinions that are sharper than anything my friends dare say to my face. My name is Madison, I am 32. I have been married to my husband Daniel, who is 35, for almost 10 years, and we have two children, Emma, who is 7, and Noah, who is 5. If anyone had told the 17-year-old me that one day I would be writing about my stepfather being a better grandparent to my children than my father-in-law, I would have laughed and then cried, because my childhood was messy in ways most people do not want to admit. My father walked out when I was 14. He did not storm off, he faded. He became a story I told myself when I needed a villain and a convenient absence. My mother remarried a few years later to a man named Jeff, who arrived when I was 17. At first, I resented him. I did not want anyone replacing my father, and I was determined not to give him the power to hurt me the way my biological father had, but over time Jeff quietly did the things that matter. Jeff is not a showy man. He is the sort of person who notices when someone is running low on milk, who remembers the name of a friend I mentioned once at a party 2 years ago, who will bring a casserole over without announcing it. When my community college tuition bills piled up and my mother could not cover them because she was working long shifts, Jeff wrote the check. When I graduated, he came to the ceremony and sat in the second row waving like a proud fool. When I bought my first used car, he co-signed the loan and never made a grand speech about it. He grinned and said, "I believe in you," and that was enough. Years later, when Daniel and I were a couple of broke newlyweds learning the brutal math of rent and utility bills, Jeff slipped envelopes with grocery money under my arm at family dinners and told me not to tell my mother it came from him because he did not want me to feel like a failure. I am not saying he has been perfect. He makes mistakes. He snores. He will repeat a story until a glass is empty and the clock has moved on. He is not my biological father, but when it came to showing up, he was better than my father ever was. Daniel's family brings a different set of problems. His father, Richard, is 63. He is charismatic in the way men who have always been the loudest in the room are charismatic. He is the one who tells a joke at the barbecue that gets the beer laugh, who claps someone on the back and buys the first round. He is the kind of man people describe as fun, the kind of man who has a million hilarious stories about nights he cannot remember. He loves his grandchildren. He will throw money at a problem with the confidence that money is an answer. He has a style of affection that is loud, indulgent, and performative. To him, the role of grandfather is a title with an owner, and that owner is Richard. He does not see Jeff as family. To him, Jeff is your mother's husband, and that phrase carries dismissal. The difference between how they show love is not theoretical to my children. It is practical and concrete. When Emma was born, Jeff opened a college savings account in her name and started putting $100 a month into it. He did the same for Noah when he arrived. $100 is not an amount that makes anyone rich, but compounded every month it becomes a promise, and it is a promise Jeff kept. He is not wealthy. He balances his checking account with an almost painful precision, and he will invite you to borrow his tools before he will buy you anything flashy, but he is intentional. Richard, on the other hand, expresses affection with high-ticket items and spectacle. He buys expensive toys, noisy gadgets, and on Emma's 3rd birthday, he gave her a miniature, all-terrain vehicle that he thought was the funniest and most masculine gift in the world. She was 3. The toy spent most of its life in the garage because she was not tall enough to ride it. Jeff gave her a library card holder and a set of children's science kits. Richard laughed and said, "That is boring. She will not remember a book. She will remember the thrill of her first ride on the ATV. Guess which one Emma actually talks about at 7 years old. Guess which one she asks to read aloud at bedtime. When Daniel lost his job for 4 months during the pandemic, which was the hardest stretch we have had financially and emotionally, Jeff was the one who slid envelopes across our doorstep with $200 and said quietly, for groceries, "Do not tell your mother I gave this." He did not announce it on social media. He did not write a check with a note to make anyone feel inferior. He left it like a small, warm thing. Richard came by once during that stretch with a case of beer and said with a laugh, "At least you have more time with the kids, huh?" It is not just what they give that matters, it is how they give it. Jeff's help carried no performance. Richard's help came with an audience. The children adore Jeff. They call him Papa Jeff. I do not know when that name stuck, and I do not care. I will never be the person who keeps a child from naming a person they love. Every Sunday morning, the kids will FaceTime him with drawings and Lego towers and triumphs about reading a new word. Emma will show him a new sentence she wrote about dinosaurs, and Noah will probably hold up a crayon scribble like it is a certificate of immortality. Jeff will listen and ask questions that make them feel seen. Who did you draw? What did the dinosaur say? He will tuck those drawings into a corner of his den like a small museum. He has taught them to measure things with their hands, to fix a loose doorknob, and to make pancakes that are barely oval and entirely delicious because of the love in the batter. They will sing songs about him that are half nonsense and entirely earnest. They have a comfort around him that is rare. When they are with him, something in their bodies relaxes. Richard bristles when he sees it. He believes that there must be a hierarchy to affection, that there is only one true grandfather, and that role must belong exclusively to him. He said to me once, and I remember it as if I am replaying a camera on loop, "You are confusing them. A child should only have one grandfather, and that is me." I tried to explain that love is not limited like pie slices, that it is the one thing that grows the more it is shared, but he did not hear it. He heard only a perceived slur against his territory. It is small things and big things that piled up like snow until we had an avalanche. Jeff's quiet investments, Richard's flashy generosity. Jeff's early morning help, Richard's public proclamations. Jeff showing up at school concerts to cheer and clap like a private cheerleader. Richard showing up with a camera and a grin and a comment about how he always knew Emma had talent. When Emma wanted to learn the violin after seeing a school performance, Jeff bought her a beginner instrument and an introductory lesson package because he listened to the small voice that said she was curious. He did not think about whether the gift would earn him credit at the next family dinner. He thought about Emma wanting to pull a bow across strings. Richard heard about it and bought Noah an expensive gaming console for his 5th birthday, which, to be blunt, is ridiculous for a child who is still figuring out how to hold a pencil. It is the kind of gift that says I want to be remembered and I want the children to think of me when they have fun. He said to me later in the kitchen, because that is where Richard does his best damage when there is an audience close by, "I guess I am just the wallet in this family." That line struck something in me because it exposed a deeper insecurity I did not know I had until it was named. I am not a woman who wants to be defined by who pays for what. I am a woman who wants my children to have people who care for them, who show up, who listen. Still, I found myself feeling defensive, like the voice inside my head that had spent decades protecting me from my biological father was suddenly whispering that I was responsible for policing who loved my children. I am their mother. I will not stand in the way of love, but I also will not sit silently while someone tries to reduce family to a scoreboard. The Christmas that everything blew up was not a spectacular visual battle. It was ordinary, the kind of holiday that should be soft with warmth, but became jagged instead. We sat around the tree and opened presents, the children with wide eyes and small, greasy hands, the house smelling of cinnamon and something burned in the oven because I was cooking with a distracted heart. Jeff handed Emma a little box with a violin case inside. She had been saving her pocket money and had been asking about lessons for months. Her face when she saw it was something I wish I could bottle, a mixture of disbelief and joy that made her cheeks go round. She hugged Jeff and whispered, "You always listen to me." Noah, not to be outdone by the moral clarity of a 7-year-old, ripped apart the gift from Richard and discovered the new console. He squealed in a way that made the dog bark and Emma clapped politely. Richard stood there with a smile that has all the wrong edges. Later that night, he pulled me into the kitchen, closed the door, and with a voice that did not match his smile, he said to me, "If you let that man take my place in their lives, do not expect me to stick around." A week after Christmas, the tension that had been simmering finally boiled over in a way I did not expect. Richard called Daniel and, instead of softening or trying to smooth things over, he delivered an ultimatum. He told Daniel that either he made Jeff back off or he would not be involved anymore. It was not a suggestion, it was not a request, it was a demand. Daniel was furious because he has always been a man who values loyalty to family, but also believes in fairness. He told his father that he could not dictate who loved our children or who our children loved in return. He said that if his dad wanted a relationship with Emma and Noah, it had to be built on something other than threats and ownership. Richard hung up on him. No goodbyes, no negotiation, just the click of a call ending and the silence that followed. The fallout was immediate and heavy. For the next 2 weeks, Richard ignored my texts, the ones I sent to ask if he was feeling better or if he wanted to see the kids. He did not show up for his usual Sunday drop-by, he did not call, he did not even send his usual jokey memes that he thought were a form of bonding. It was as if he decided that absence would prove a point, that we would feel the gap and run back to him asking for reconciliation on his terms. What he did not anticipate was that life kept moving forward, and the children did not notice the empty chair as much as he thought they would. While Richard was pulling away, Jeff was stepping in as he always has, not with fanfare but with quiet actions. He took Emma to her first violin lesson. She walked into the studio with her bow clutched in both hands and a nervous grin, and she came out humming the simplest string exercises, like she had discovered the secrets of the universe. Jess stood by the door, clapping like she had just played at Carnegie Hall. A week later, he took Noah to the Science Museum. Noah wandered through the dinosaur exhibit with his eyes wide and his hands sticky from the cotton candy Jeff insisted on buying him, pointing at fossils and gasping like he had found treasure. Jeff was not trying to replace anyone. He was just being present in the way he always has been. The house was full of stories about those outings. Emma practiced her violin in the living room, making scratchy, uneven sounds that still filled the space with joy. Noah carried around the little glow-in-the-dark stars Jeff bought at the museum gift shop and insisted we stick them on his ceiling. Every conversation with them was colored by Papa Jeff. It was not that they had forgotten Richard, it was that they had no reason to pause their excitement and wonder why he was not around. Children do not measure time in absences the way adults do. They measure it in who shows up to clap, who listens to the rambling stories, who takes them by the hand to show them something new. One evening, I decided to test the waters because I did not want to assume what my children were feeling. I asked Emma gently if she missed her grandpa. She looked up from her drawing, shrugged, and said with the brutal honesty only a child can deliver, "Papa Jeff plays with us more." That answer landed in my chest like a stone. It was not said with malice. It was not meant to wound. It was a simple observation of reality from a 7-year-old who values consistency more than titles. I sat with that answer for days. I thought about how Richard had chosen to withdraw to prove his importance, how he believed absence would highlight his role, how he assumed the children would long for him the way adults imagine longing works. What actually happened was that the space he left behind was filled naturally by the person who had been there all along. I thought about the absurdity of Richard trying to compete for a crown no one was awarding. Children do not choose their favorites like contestants in a game. They gravitate toward whoever shows up, whoever listens, whoever remembers their favorite color, and takes them to places where their curiosity can grow. That moment with Emma was the one that crystallized everything for me. I realized Richard was trying to compete in a game that wasn't even real. The kids just naturally gravitate toward Jeff because of his consistency. When Richard finally decided to make his return, he did it in the way he always does, loud, dramatic, and impossible to ignore. It was Noah's birthday, and he pulled into our driveway with a rental truck full of equipment. Out came workers setting up a giant inflatable bounce house that covered nearly half the backyard, followed by a magician he had hired to perform a full show. It was the kind of entrance designed to make everyone talk, and to Richard, that was the point. He wanted to reclaim the spotlight and prove that he was still the primary grandfather, the one who could dazzle and amaze. The party started off as chaotic fun. Kids from Noah's kindergarten class were running around, shoes flying off as they launched themselves into the bounce house. Parents were chatting and laughing, grateful for the entertainment that kept their kids occupied. The magician pulled coins from ears, made balloon animals, and got Noah to giggle so hard he nearly toppled over. On the surface, it was a successful birthday party. But beneath that surface, The tension was a living thing. Richard's eyes never stopped tracking Jeff. Every time Jeff bent down to help a child with something, Richard stiffened. Every time Jeff laughed with Emma or adjusted Noah's paper crown, Richard's jaw tightened. He could not enjoy the moment because he was too busy keeping score. The breaking point came during the gift opening. Noah had a pile of brightly wrapped presents stacked in front of him, and as any 5-year-old would, he was tearing into them with pure joy. At one point, Jeff knelt beside him to help untangle the layers of tape on a particularly stubborn box. It was nothing more than an act of kindness, the kind of help any adult would naturally give a child overwhelmed by wrapping paper. But Richard snapped. His voice cut through the room, sharp and loud, when he said, "Let his real grandpa do it." The words froze everyone in place. The chatter stopped, the kids paused mid-laugh, and the air turned thick. Jeff's hand stilled on the ribbon, his face caught between hurt and restraint. My stomach clenched as Noah looked up in confusion, not understanding why the mood had shifted so suddenly. Even Emma went quiet, sensing the weight of the moment. My mother, who has never been one to let an ugly scene linger, immediately pulled Richard aside and led him to the backyard. I could see them through the kitchen window, her hands gesturing sharply as she spoke, his arms crossed and his face set in that stubborn way I know too well. Their voices were muffled by the glass, but the body language told the story clearly enough. She was scolding him, and he was refusing to accept fault. When they came back inside, the party limped on, but the joy was thinner, forced. Richard plastered on a smile, but it never reached his eyes. He clapped too loudly at the magician's finale, handed out slices of cake like they were proof of his generosity, and laughed at jokes no one told. He was trying to stitch the mood back together, but everyone could feel the rip. Later that evening, when most of the guests had left and only close family remained, Richard cornered me. His face was red, not from alcohol, but from indignation. He accused me of engineering the entire situation so that Jeff would come out looking like the hero. He claimed that I encouraged Jeff to insert himself into moments that should belong to Richard, and that I had been plotting all along to replace him in the eyes of my children. The anger in his voice was not the anger of someone hurt. It was the anger of someone who believed he was being strategically outmaneuvered in a competition that only existed in his head. That was the moment I hit my breaking point. I had been patient, I had explained, I had tried to soften the reality for him, but hearing him accuse me of treating my children like pawns was the final straw. I told him that if he wanted revenge against Jeff, that was his choice, but he was not allowed to take it out on 2 kids who just wanted love and attention. I told him that if he could not handle sharing the role of grandfather, then maybe he did not deserve the role at all. Richard's face hardened. His jaw set, his eyes narrowed, and he gave me a look I had only seen once before, the kind of look someone gives when they feel betrayed beyond repair. He muttered something under his breath, loud enough for me to catch, but not loud enough for the kids to hear. He stormed off, muttering that I'd regret it. Richard's version of revenge was not dramatic fireworks or confrontation. It was something smaller, pettier, but it spoke volumes about where his head was at. He took to Facebook, the place where he is always most comfortable playing the role of the charming storyteller. He wrote a long post about how he was heartbroken because his grandchildren were being manipulated to love a stranger more than their blood. He did not name names, but he did not need to. Everyone who knew him, who knew us, could fill in the blanks. He painted himself as the victim, the man pushed aside by scheming hands, the grandfather who just wanted to love his grandchildren but was denied that chance. Within hours, the comments started rolling in. Cousins from Daniel's side, distant aunts, old friends of Richard's, all chimed in. They messaged me privately, saying they had heard I was cruel to exclude him. They said children should always know their blood. They said I needed to reconsider what kind of example I was setting. It was the kind of family drama that bleeds across phones, where my notifications buzzed like a hive of wasps. For a moment, I sat there with my chest tight, wondering if the narrative would spin so far out of my control that I would be painted as the villain permanently. But then something happened I did not anticipate. Daniel, who has always tried to keep peace with his father, decided he was done staying quiet. He posted screenshots of the savings accounts Jeff had been building for Emma and Noah since the day they were born. He wrote a caption that cut sharper than anything I could have crafted. A real grandfather invests in their future, not his pride. The effect was immediate. The tide turned in the comments. People who had been ready to defend Richard suddenly shifted. They began praising Jeff, pointing out how consistency matters more than blood, how actions speak louder than words. Some even commented that Richard should be grateful his grandchildren had someone so steady in their lives. Within a day, Richard deleted the post. The comments had become a landslide of truth that he could not control, and his carefully built image of the fun-loving, perfect grandfather cracked wide open. But deletion did not mean reconciliation. Since then, he has not spoken to us directly. No calls, no texts, no attempts to show up in person. Instead, he tried to reassert himself in the most passive way possible. A small package arrived in the mail addressed to Emma. Inside was a cheap stuffed bear with a tag still hanging from its ear. Tucked in the box was a note written in Richard's messy scrawl, "From your only grandpa." When Emma opened it, she turned the bear over in her hands once, set it on the couch, and went back to coloring. Later, when I asked her what she thought, she shrugged with the blunt honesty only a child has and said she wanted Papa Jeff to take her to the zoo that weekend instead. That simple statement said everything. The bear sat untouched for days until it eventually migrated to the toy bin, buried under blocks and dolls that actually carried memories. That is where we are now. Jeff is not just present in my children's lives, he is fully woven into them. He is the one they ask for when they want to share good news, the one they call when they are proud of something, the one they plan weekends around. He has become the steady, loving grandfather figure that children need, the kind who shows up, who listens, who gives without expecting applause. Richard, on the other hand, is sulking in the corner of the story he created, angry that reality did not bend his pride. He believed that blood was enough to secure loyalty, that money and big gestures could outweigh patience and love. But children do not operate that way. They know who makes them feel safe, who shows up time after time, who pays attention. In the end, Richard's attempts at revenge have only highlighted the truth he refuses to accept. No matter how much money he throws around, no matter how loudly he tries to demand respect, no matter how many posts he writes and deletes, love cannot be commanded. Love is earned. My kids already made their choice in the most natural way possible. When they reach for a hand, when they want to share their joy, when they decide who to spend their time with, it is not Richard they turn to. Their real grandfather, the one they see with clear eyes and open hearts, is Jeff. And that is the reality Richard cannot stand. My kids already chose who their grandfather really is, and it wasn't him.